welcome back to the new and improved, now not the Round by Round Boxing podcast. We've officially named it the Box Bet Pod, but
it rolls off your tongue a little bit.
Yeah, Box Bet Pod. So the idea here is I'm Alex Burgos, editor-in-chief of Round by Round Boxing, Vladimir Lick, ringtv.com, Round by Round
also
Boxing.
Also known as Bobby the Brain Heenan. Sometimes.
Yes, yeah, he might have a new AKA every week, but I will say what's plagued us at Round by Round, maybe over time when we do these kinds of projects, is that we're not consistent. And so the number one thing is that we want to bring you guys consistency. The faces will be Vlad and I, and we'll mix in some guests here and there. But the idea behind this Box Bet Pod is some quick previews, betting lines, and just our opinion on what the matchups are going to be. So we hope you guys find some value in that. Before we jump into the recap, I like to say I got a hard time from a couple of friends that actually watched our podcast last week and were asking me why I was drinking Kirkland Costco water. Now, I didn't think the water scene was so competitive, but I did get a hard time. And then on Vlad's recommendation, our man Tony Nassa, who represents the RX water brand, who I'm sure you see on Instagram and, sponsoring different events and different athletes and things like that. So it made sense. Vlad's like, hit him up. You're getting, chastised for drinking cheap water. Kirkland's always been good to me. So no shade on them. But we're happy to announce that this will be the first episode that we're officially sponsored by RX Water. We haven't gotten our shipment in of kind of gear and water and stuff like that. So for today, I will be dehydrating myself with a good hazy IPA. Next week, I'll be hydrating with RX Water. But cheers to you,
give us
Vlad.
the water. Thank you. Give us the water. Thank you,
For
Tony.
Sure. Yes, thank you, Tony. You're the man. But yeah, moving on and diving right into our premiere last week. Talk a little bit about what you thought was going to happen with the fight, starting with Chocolatito and Estrada, and what actually did happen.
All right. Well, I came on the show last week and I picked Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez to win. And one of the reasons is because he was on a 4-fight win streak. I love what I saw. He was an underdog in his previous fight, which he was last Saturday as well. He pulled off a late stoppage. And I just felt like, it could be just one man on this planet that has his number. And he wasn't fighting that man. And he was fighting someone he already has beaten. So I said, I'm going to go with this small underdog. I'm going to go with Chocolatito. You actually did go with Estrada. But, to my eye, to my naked eye, to my amateur eye, or my professional eye, or what have you, Chocolatito won. A lot of folks agree with me. But the scorecards are the scorecards. We got to go by the cards. And according to the scorecards, officially, they gave it to Estrada. So I take the L on that one.
Yeah. We'll preface these previews or reviews with our record. So overall, ding, ding, I went 3-0. Overall, you went 2-1. But I wouldn't be mad if I got this one wrong, and which I think I did. So two things here that I'll mention. Chocolatito was lights out. I didn't think he had that type of fight still in him. He showed us that he's not finished by any means. Like you said, it might just be Sorung Visai has his number, or that type of fight with that type of guy is just always going to be difficult for him. I thought he won, and I thought no way in hell did he lose 117-111. So we'll put that out there. I think I just got lucky in the sense that because in terms of the pick, I thought Estrada was going to wear him down and then probably stop him. That wasn't the fight that we saw. And so again, I agree with you. I thought Gonzalez won, and it just so happens that that I got the pick right on that one. But talk about the co-main, which was between the two women, Cecilia Brækhus and Jessica McCaskill. Shout out to Rick Ramos because he commented on the YouTube video on the last one. Team McCaskill. And I told him we went 2 for 2 on that one, Vlad and I.
Well, so we started our show last week, and I was pretty steadfast. I said I'm going with Jess. She was a small underdog coming into the fight. I just love everything I saw about her, and Cecilia is an all-time great, but didn't like the body language, talk of retirement. I just thought there was just Jessica McCaskill was just all wrong for Cecilia. So I was pretty confident to go with Jessica again. That I don't always pick underdogs. I do usually tend to go for the favorites, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I did go with Jessica McCaskill. You actually were swaying and you were, flip-flopping. I'll give you the credit for McCaskill, but I want to make sure that everyone, Rick Ramos included, and everyone else know, and I want them all to know that, I was steadfast from the beginning, picking McCaskill, and I had to convince you with my pristine breakdown of why I thought she was going to win. But kudos to you for joining in. And yeah, I mean, it was from the first round. I mean, she just dominated that fight. And the funny thing is the first fight, it was similar the first few rounds. I mean, McCaskill was just the aggressor fighter. She landed a clean shot. She was dictating the action of the fight. But Cecilia came on, and she made it a close fight. And I still, obviously it was a close decision. I thought Jessica won the first fight, pretty easily and took the belts from her. But it was still close, and Cecilia made it a closer fight. That did not occur last week. Cecilia she tried. It's not in her. Not to say that she needs to stop, but Jessica's just all wrong for her. Yeah,
I was wavering a little bit. I thought, I will reiterate that I thought that Breakus won the first fight, close fight. But, McCaskill definitely took it. It took a little later for her to get the motor going this time. And it was, just a thing of too little, too late. But it was a great fight. I'd like to see McCaskill land a big fight. I wouldn't mind seeing her in a Katie Taylor rematch. As is the case with most of these women and the high profile women, somebody's got to jump up or down a couple different weights. So who knows? Who knows what happens? It may be that she has to go up. It may be that someone else has to come up to meet her. But hopefully, she's an exciting fighter. She's got a cool story. She's just put your hard hat on and go to work type of person. And so it's hard to root against someone like that. So it was good to see that. And shout out again to Coach Rick Ramos and that whole gang over there. In the third fight that we broke down, this one is actually funny. And Vlad, I'll let you take this one away. David Benavidez versus Ronald Ellis in the main event for the PBC Showtime. Tell us how those picks went down.
Well, look, you said right away. I mean, he's rugged, right? A fighting family. He was coming to lay down. I picked Benavidez by stoppage. I was getting nervous as the fight was going on that Benavidez was just going to win a decision. He was just beating on him. There was talk between rounds in Ellis's corner, like, hey, show me something or I'm going to stop the fight. And he actually did. He came back and he landed some shots on Dave. I think David either took a round off or he was just like, listen, this guy really can't hurt me. I'm not going to punch myself out or risk, getting caught by something silly. So I was a little concerned as to whether he was actually going to get the stoppage, but he broke him down. Again, he was a heavy favorite. You really can't take a money line pick on David Benavidez unless you parlay him with something else. And usually, as we can talk about that later on, when you parlay with something else, it's a recipe for disaster. And I can write a book on that. But I did think he was going to stop him. He ultimately did stop him, so we get credit for that one.
Right. Watching that fight, I think I texted you and I was like, you bullied me into thinking that the stoppage was going to happen. It eventually did, but I would have hung my hat on, saying, I was right. David Benavidez is not going to stop Ronald Ellis. I mean, after the fight, Ellis even said, I could have kept on going, but probably a better idea. I mean, I don't know. It went late. I wasn't surprised at how tough he is. One thing I will say that did surprise me is I don't remember David Benavidez getting hit so much. Even in the Ronald Graville fights that were competitive. I don't know. I don't know if it just maybe that he didn't feel like Ellis had much to offer in way of power and couldn't hurt him. But I think that opens him up to potentially more fights just because he looks a lot. And of course, Jamal Charlo says, first thing he says is he gets hit too much, on the Brian Custer podcast. Cool. He gets hit too much, then let's see what you could do with that. So a lot of people, so it might be that old Triple G ploy where he's just got his hands down against the Willie Monroes of the world because they can't hurt him. And it just entices other people to maybe take a chance and fight him. But hopefully, I will say, hopefully that opens him up to some more big fights, because obviously, like we talked last week, I don't think the Canelo fight and the Caleb Plant fight are happening anytime soon. So now we got to look at maybe some other top names, maybe guys moving up, maybe him moving up. What's going to happen. But he did look a little vulnerable, but I think he's a beast. He's a monster, and I'd love to see him. He's becoming even more fan friendly, and I think as he's talking more, his dad's talking more on Instagram, it's only getting better from here, because they're willing to fight anybody.
I agree.
All right, so moving on, let's talk a little bit about boxing this weekend coming up. We got a couple little storylines with the Vergil Ortiz Maurice Hooker fight, but we'll start with the DAZN fight. The cruiserweight bout between Lawrence Okolie and Krzysztof Glowacki. Both guys made weight earlier today. Talk about your pick. The line, I believe, most betting websites has Okolie as a slight favorite.
Yeah, no, he's actually, I mean, it's not a slight favorite. I mean, it's a slight favorite compared to, Vergil Ortiz or something like that. But I mean, in most books, you're going to have to lay down $350 to get back $100 if you bet Okolie. So, look, here's the thing about Okolie. Okolie is 6'5". He's 5 inches taller than Glowacki. He's younger, taller, longer, faster, and fresher, and more active. We haven't seen Glowacki, who's a skilled fighter. Glowacki is a former world champion. I think he's a former 2-time world champion. We haven't seen him in 2 years, and he was knocked out by Bradis pretty badly. That was the last time we saw him. So that's one red flag, right? Would you agree, right? Inactivity, red flag. Here's another red flag. Glowacki suffered from COVID-19. We don't know if he had symptoms or not, but he had it, and there's a lot that could be lost in translation. But he did say that he feels better now than he did at the end of the year. I think he had it in December. So does that mean he wasn't feeling well? Does that mean he had all the effects of COVID-19 and he beat it and he's feeling better? We don't know, but he had it, and we don't know what toll that may have taken on him or affected his training camp or anything. So that's red flag number 2. So I have Okolie winning this fight. I want to make that clear. I was toying with the idea of Okolie by stoppage. So I'm going to pick Okolie to win. I am going to say Okolie is going to get the stoppage in this fight. Here's the thing also about Okolie. This is a very interesting kind of fighter. He's not the most exciting fighter, right? So when you think about like British big guys, and even though he's not a heavyweight, he campaigns as a cruiserweight, but like think about like a Daniel Dubois, who is knocking everyone out and is very exciting, but technically lacked something that Joe Joyce exposed, right? And that was an upset, a huge upset. Okolie's not like this line him up, I'm knocking him out guy. Okolie's actually a technical fighter. I say technical, like technically skilled. Somebody else may say boring. He's actually very boring. And he recently joined with, I think, Scott McGowan. Is that how you say his name? McGowan? McGuigan. So his style has changed a little bit. But prior to that, Okolie is known for clinching. Okolie is known for jab, clinch, jab, jab, clinch, moving a little bit. So you don't see most 6'5" guys fight that way.
The Vladimir Klitschko school of fighting.
Some can argue that Vlad was a little bit more probably engaging also. Lately, Okolie has changed that. So Okolie's heard the criticism. He's heard the boos. He sees the criticism. It affects him. He's a young guy. He got himself a new trainer. His last few fights, I mean, he's knocking people out. I think he's knocked out his last 3 or 4 guys. That coupled with the fact that Glowacki's not there to move around with him. Glowacki is not there to like jab and move and do a technical, a technical kind of dance with him. Glowacki is going to bring it to him tomorrow. That I'm very sure. So I got Okolie to win, and I was thinking, is this going to go to distance? Is it going to be a stoppage? Okolie's style will tend to say that it's going to go to distance. However, because I really know that Glowacki is going to take it to him, Glowacki is not there to get a decision. He knows he's not going to get a decision anyway, so he's going to try to knock him out. And by trying to knock him out, he's going to leave himself open, and Okolie is going to stop him. He's going to knock him out also. So my official pick is Okolie by stoppage. Anyone that wants to place a wager, if you want to do Okolie by himself, like I said, it's between minus 350, minus 385, depending on the book that you want. You could parlay him with your favorite March Madness team, which I would not suggest to do, but you could do that and you could bring the odds down. You could parlay him with a Vergil Ortiz. That could be interesting. You can play with that and see what that does. You can also say the fight to not go the distance, period. So it doesn't matter who wins as long as it doesn't go to distance. That's coming in some books at minus 250. So you would lay down 250 to get back 100. Again, the downside is if Okolie just dominates him 12-round, one-sided victory, and Okolie's like, look, I don't need to take a risk. I have this fight won. Okolie's extremely skilled fighter. He can just jab his way to a victory. Again, he's tremendously longer than Glowacki. If he doesn't want Glowacki to touch him, he could probably avoid him. If that happens, you lose your money. So that is the risk. I do believe that Okolie wins. I believe Okolie stops him. I believe it will be exciting because Glowacki is going to make it exciting. I don't believe Glowacki is going to come there to just say, hey, whatever happens, or, let me go the distance with him. That's not the case. It's a world title fight. And I think Okolie is going to stop him and start to, having a little bit of a worldwide coming out party and try to win some fans over before he decides if he wants to continue campaigning at cruiserweight or move up to heavy.
A lot of good information. Yeah, and actually one thing I didn't mention is that the vacant WBO title is on the line. So there is some hardware to be fought for here. And regarding the lines, looking at BetOnline AG and 5 Dimes, which are the two that I usually go to, Okolie's a minus 400 on each of those, and Glowacki's anywhere from plus 300 to plus 325. So to your point, he's a substantial or pretty good underdog. I was going to ask you, but I think you answered the question, which was, are people overlooking this matchup with Glowacki in general? Because I guess on paper, would you say this is Okolie's most difficult fight?
Yes, that's fair.
Right. So I don't know that, you kind of lay it all on the line or try to go more attack if you're him against your toughest opponent, at least on paper. If he comes out and he feels him out and he's not the guy that maybe we think is going to test Okolie, then yeah, he gets him out of there. But I will go Okolie by decision, convincing decision. But it should be a good scrap, especially early on if they do both come at each other. So it's just a matter of styles, and we'll see how that pans out.
Just one thing, there is another fight on the card, pretty earlier on the card. It's Chris Billiam-Smith, also a cruiserweight, by the way. And, the interesting thing about Chris is he fought about, I think maybe a year and a half ago against another cruiserweight prospect, Richard Rakapo. And Richard came in as a huge favorite. Chris was a sizable underdog. And Chris took the fight to him, and Chris ended up losing a close split decision. He's on this card fighting a late replacement fighter by the name of Vasil Dukar. Now, in most books will have Chris, if it's on your book, as a minus 2,000. Again, it's very difficult to play that as a one-off. I don't know if Chris stops him or not. I can't tell you. I do believe Chris wins. I think a parlay chip of Chris and Okolie straight up 2 money lines could be interesting, depending on, how much that brings your line down to what you see it. And then the other piece is, like I said, the fight just stopping, meaning so that even if Glowacki stops him, which is Glowacki's only path to victory, I believe. So if Glowacki knocks out Okolie or Okolie knocks out Glowacki, that's going to run you minus 250. You throw Chris Billiam-Smith on that. Maybe that brings it down to minus 170-ish, minus 180-ish. Now you're in a range. If you can do something there, you can put, $200-300 down, have a decent return back. So I also would recommend that. So again, that's not going to count as an official pick for us, Chris Billiam-Smith, only because he's minus 2,000. But just to give the audience another look or another place to maybe, again, parlays are very risky because you need all the parlay pieces to hit for you to make your money. But if there is an opportunity to have something that's a little bit more, comfortable, nothing's a sure thing in boxing or in sports, period. But Chris Billiam-Smith, I do believe he comes away victorious tomorrow.
Yeah, and actually, most of the books that I've seen, at least just right now, they don't have it updated. So I don't know if they're going to be taking action on the replacement opponent for Chris Smith. So something to look at, though. Another fighter that's on the card is Anthony Fowler. Just kind of a heads up for fight fans, not even just a betting line, but fight fans, to kind of wrap your head around. Ammo Williams, who fought last week on the DAZN card, on the Matchroom card, has been, calling out Anthony Fowler a lot. Fowler is now saying he's coming into his prime. So, maybe compare both. If you watch that Ammo Williams fight, that was a big step up for him. He fought Dennis Uglin, the mama's boy, who gave him good rounds, and it was a good fight. That was exactly what Williams needed. And so maybe compare just from, your eye and your perspective, how Fowler looks and how those two would maybe meet in the future and how that would play out, because it seems like Matchroom is playing up that storyline, and that would be a one that, we'll talk about. And if that does come to fruition, we'll see who the betting favorite is there. But moving on to the next fight card and to the next main event, actually, the fight that we're going to talk about is Vergil Ortiz and Maurice Blocker. And a lot
Maurice
of stuff.
Hooker.
I'm sorry, Maurice Hooker. Maurice Blocker's from right up the street from me. Former world champion.
You should. I would leave that.
Former world champion. Tito Trinidad knocked him out too. So, anyways, so the fight that we're breaking down is Vergil Ortiz versus Maurice Hooker. Hooker obviously coming up in weight. One thing that troubles me with this fight is just his build. I slipped up and said Maurice Blocker, but maybe because his frame reminds me of Maurice Blocker. So as far as weights, actually, Vergil Ortiz came in a little overweight. He came in at 147.6, which is not a ton of weight, but he did have to come back, make weight. He hit 147 on the dot. And Maurice Hooker came in right at 147. So there's that. If the whole weight thing may continue to be an issue, because Ortiz is just a big kid. We know he has a lot of power, and he's a pretty big favorite here, bet wise. So Vlad, what do you think happens here? He's 16-0, 16 knockouts. Does that streak continue?
Oh boy! All right. So so off the bat, I believe Vergil Ortiz wins. By the way, in reference to the weight, I read a report that Ortiz's camp said that the scale was not calibrated correctly. So
that may be correct, because his face was kind of like, and most of the times they weigh in right before the official weight. And so when they're looking at it, it's just a toss, but yeah, there may be some merit to that.
Don't know. Usually a bad weight cut would concern me. I say Vergil Ortiz wins this fight. It's a coming out party. Here's the thing. Before I give the actual full prediction, it is a lot of pressure having a consecutive knockout streak. Period. It's a lot of pressure starting your career with a consecutive knockout streak, and I'm sure at some point, we'll talk about Berlanga, and he's got a first round knockout streak, so that makes it even crazier. So there's a lot of pressure when it comes to that. Eventually, it's going to come to an end, and doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come to an end in the way of a loss. It's just going to come, as your competition increases, it's going to come to an end. The other piece is we don't know what Virgil's going to work at. I mean, maybe Virgil actually wants the rounds. I mean, he had rounds in his last fight against Vargas, but maybe Virgil wants to go to distance and just see how he looks in the last few rounds. That's important also for his development. And then as it starts to grow and everyone's looking for the knockout, he'll have a relief. So if he wins a decision tomorrow, the first few days, people are going to be like, oh, you didn't knock him out. That's going to subside pretty quickly. It's going to be another victory, and it's going to be like, all right, who's next? I'm not going to go backwards in strength of opponent. I want to go forwards. And he's called out on the Akin Barak show. He said, he'd love to fight Danny Garcia, who I don't think is going to stick around in 147, but he wants Danny Garcia or Terence Crawford or Ugas, any of those guys. And eventually he says he'd like to meet Spence at 154. So Virgil wins. I think the knockout streak will continue. And the reason why it'll continue is because I think Hooker is tailor-made for that. And it's not only because we saw him get knocked out by Ramirez in a fun fight, but that, Ramirez had dropped him and ultimately finished him. Hooker likes to engage. So it's going to be one of those situations where if Hooker's there for him, and Hooker's not afraid of anything, and Hooker's moving up in weight. So if Hooker's engaging with him, Ortiz is going to stop him. So I will officially go on the record and say it'll be Vergil Ortiz by knockout. But anyone that wants to sprinkle $20, put Vergil Ortiz by points. I saw it at like plus 300. You'll make back some good coin on that. I mean, put $10. You'll make back some good coin. You'll make back like $30 or something. That could happen as well, only because Virgil may want that to happen. I think if he wants Hooker to go, Hooker's going to go, or the ref will get in there and stop it. Sometimes we saw that in one of the Triple G knockout. Might have been in Monte Carlo where the referee kind of got in, maybe he didn't really need to. And so that can happen. Corner can always stop it. The ref can stop it by accumulation of punches. So ultimately, that's what's going to happen tomorrow. I believe it's going to be Virgil's coming out party. I think that Golden Boy wanted Hooker. I think Ortiz's team wanted Hooker because they know that Hooker will be there for him, for it to be an explosive fight, entertaining, and a knockout. And I think that that's what they're banking on. So I'm going to go along with that. And official pick, I'll say Vergil Ortiz by stoppage.
Exactly. I agree. I think Vergil Ortiz by stoppage. I don't think Mo Hooker is by any means like a Diego Corrales who totally gave away his height and his reach and just wanted to bang on the inside always. He's not that bad at giving up his physical advantages, but he's not going to box you for 12 rounds. He does like to engage, and it may mirror a little bit the Jose Ramirez fight. I think Ortiz is more refined as a boxer, and I think he's got good, he mentioned it, but he's got good ring IQ, good ring smarts. And so I think what makes him so dangerous is, from my perspective, he's not going in there hunting for the knockout. He's showing off some skills and he's showing off some movement, and he is just getting better because he is willing to go rounds. I don't think he's so knockout hungry. He's just really heavy-handed. It got to a point, I think, with the Samuel Vargas fight that maybe a little bit he was reaching because he's like, man, I've hit this guy with everything that I've got in my arsenal, and he's not really moving. Props to Vargas for that. But, eventually he did get him out of there. But, I just think that those blows, accumulation, whether it's Bomac in the corner, the ref, or he just knocks him out. I think Ortiz is just too much. Like you said, he's tailor-made. He's moving up in weight. I would have much rather seen Hooker in a fight against Regis Prograis, which was the fight that was booked right up the road, was going to be for me at the MGM in Maryland before the whole COVID and the pandemic stuff. And I'm really sad that one didn't go down because I would have loved to see that fight between those two guys. I think that's a more favorable matchup. Not to say Hooker wins, but that would have been a more favorable matchup for him. But again, he's filling out, 147 is probably easier for him to make weight. Betting wise, yeah, like you said, if you want to have some fun, put some on the decision for Ortiz, but I think any which way he wins it, and I will go with Ortiz stoppage.
Yeah, just for those that like a little bit of data for the nerds out there, Hooker has given some people their first losses. Terry Flanagan, Mikel Lespierre, Alex Saucedo, Courtney Jackson, I believe. So he's given some people their first losses. So, for those that are just analytical driven, that could be something, but none of those guys are Vergil Ortiz. None of those guys had the, the cachet that Vergil Ortiz has. And just by the way, I had the pleasure of speaking to him a few times. Humble guy, doesn't talk smack, just really trains, and plays musical instruments, self-taught musical instruments, just a really nice guy. He's someone that boxing would love to embrace as a world champion. And I know that Golden Boy obviously wants him as a world champion. Golden Boy needs him as a world champion. So I think tomorrow's a coming out party, and it should be fun, should be exciting. And one thing will not be boring.
Exactly. The last thing I'll mention is sometimes you get guys that have the persona and the ability to hype themselves up. I think Ortiz is the opposite. I think he needs to not necessarily be more boastful, but we'd like to hear from him more. We'd like to see him promoted more by Golden Boy, and because he's lights out in the ring. And so if we're talking about the next step, whether that's fighting a top guy at welterweight or maybe moving to 154 and looking for a Danny Garcia at 154, because he's already mentioned that he's going up, and then eventually an Errol Spence. But whatever weight class it is, he's got power. He's got the frame to move up. And, like you see guys, it's not always that their mouth backs up their skill. We know Ortiz has the skill, a little bit more maybe pizzazz outside of the ring, and not necessarily to be boastful, like I said, or just a trash talker, but we'd like to get to know him more so that the casual fan can say, oh, wow, like I like this guy, he seems cool. And oh, by the way, he's a killer in the ring. He's going to knock you out.
Let's see what happens when no one is really talking smack at him either. So let's see what happens when he gets into a situation where, and by the way, Maurice Hooker is not that guy either, right. He's a gentleman, but let's see when he gets into a situation where he has an opponent that wants to engage and trash talk with him and see what he does. Because like Danny Garcia is another guy who is a humble person. We just don't think of him that way because Angel is always the front guy when it comes to like starting talking trash and everything. But Danny's doesn't really do it as much, And then the funny thing is, Errol Spence, at the same time of his career, 16 fights, 20 fights. Errol Spence is very humble. Wasn't braggadocious, and then something changed with him where he was like, I don't think I'm getting the respect, and now I'm going to come at these cats. So we'll see what happens when someone engages with Vergil Ortiz. But Vergil Ortiz has been talking about Terence Crawford, and he actually used the words, "That fight is inevitable. It's going to happen." Boy, would I love to see that fight before Crawford ages out of that fight. Boy, would I love to see that fight.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, whatever's going on with Crawford Top Rank, I just don't know that we're going to see any of those cross-promotional fights. And if we see one, for me, it has to be Errol Spence. It has to be. And so Ortiz may just be a little too late to the party. But one that we may look at down the road is a guy by the name of Boots.
Yep, we're going to talk about that fight soon.
Yes. So I would love, that's one that kind of doesn't get mentioned, but I feel like they're pretty much in the same spot. And, that could be huge down the line. I just hope it doesn't turn into one of these shouting matches online and we never see them fight in the ring, but we shall see. So, my man, I appreciate your time. I appreciate us going over these fights. I hope the fight fans get a little bit of benefit out of this and get their bet on tomorrow. And as always, we'll be consistent with this. We'll be back next week, and we will have our RX water next to us next week.
All right. Looking forward to next week.